Hey guys, it is Bible Scribe again. Thank you for joining me. This video is actually for a friend. And friend, you probably know who you are, but Revelation chapter 20, was it talking about 1,000 years or thousands of years? This question comes up because of a specific reason, but a lot of people look at the English word thousand and the Greek word behind that, and they question whether that Greek word, because it is a plural form, uh, whether that means that it's really thousands of years for the millennial reign of the martyrs with Christ, or if it is simply 1,000 years as it says in the English. And, I'm getting now heavily into Revelation 20, and I'm starting to think that many or most eschatologies and denominations really hang their hat on their view of Revelation 20. It could possibly be the linchpin of eschatology study, as I'm finding out. And so that's why I'm doing this video. I try to answer these questions that people come with because there's so many things that just leave us hanging as far as prophecy is concerned and the way we tend to interpret things. So this video is not terribly structured, but you're going to see how I have now studied through this to find out my conclusion on this topic. And you can see what is starting to happen. I don't know if you can see that very well. Looks like my chroma key is killing it, but you can see I'm starting to map the different Greek letters of each style from different manuscripts. You guys are forcing me to do this stuff. It's fun. I'm having a blast doing this, but I just wanted to show you like the level I'm going to of detail here so I can consistently translate these manuscripts. But we are going to look at some of those in this study. So let's talk quickly about what is the issue with this question and where does the question come from. I'm going to try to pull some stuff up for you as we look at things. But the question of this 1,000 years, the one who brought this up was a man named Tischendorf. And this would have been in the 1800s that he did his work. And I'll just read you this real quick paragraph. The question whether 1,000 years or thousands of years best represents the thought of Revelation 20, 1 through 7, is raised by a translation offered in the Tischendorf 8th edition of the Greek New Testament, where the expression chilioi, and I can't say these words right because I am not that much of a Greek scholar, but let me show it to you real quick. Right here is where I'm reading, where the expression chilioi and atos or something is the next word, which means years. Chilioi meaning thousand or thousands. We're going to find that out. Meaning thousands of years, as chilioi is plural. Most texts have this form of the word, and for 1,000 years, those two words right there, and it means 1,000 years, or is translated that way in the manuscript. So this is where this comes from. It's this guy Tischendorf, and we're going to learn just a little bit more about who Tischendorf was and what he discovered as we continue. But for now, my first thought when I came to this was I really want to study these manuscripts because I've already done this in other videos. I'm going to go back to these super old manuscripts, and the ones that I tend to look at is the Codex Vaticanus, Alexandrinus, and Sinaiticus, because they contain the entire scripture. For Revelation, we have almost nothing before the time period that those came out. So those are the earliest full manuscripts of Revelation that we have. We have some fragments, but we don't have anything from Revelation 20 that was before these manuscripts. So that's why I'm going to them, in case you're wondering, well, that's the Alexandrian line of texts. Well, what the scholars say is that these Alexandrian codices have such a small variation that it does not affect what we're looking at anyway from the Textus Receptus. Okay, so just know that these, number one, were much earlier than any of the manuscripts of the Textus Receptus, and number two, they have such a small number of variations that does not affect what we're looking at. Okay, so that should quell any question about these codices we're going to look at. But these were from the time frame of about 300 to 500 BC or AD, excuse me. Get my time zones right here. So here we go. I'm bringing it up for you because I have done what I did in my other videos. And so this first is the Codex Sinaiticus right here. And if you've seen my other video, you saw this before, how this looks. But I came in here and I found the essentially section that was Revelation chapter 20. And I had to bump the contrast there just a little so I could see it better. And in here, I'm now going to highlight for you these words, these 1,000 words. So there is our word. And as you can see, as I scroll way in on that and zoom in on it, it's Zilia. So we saw in our comment that this was the form that's used in Revelation 20, but we can see here that's not chilioi, or, and I think I'm saying that wrong, I think it's chilioi, or chilias with an S, which would be a plural, but this is chilia. And so this was my first hint that, well, this doesn't look like the plural form that people are saying it is. Because if you noticed in what I read to begin with, it's that chilioi or chilios that is the word that denotes a plural thousands, okay? So now my goal, now that I've seen this, and here I can put the words here so you see that this is the passage. I went ahead and translated some others. This is verse 3 of Revelation chapter 20. Dragon, the serpent, the ancient who is Diabolos, the devil, and the Satanas, and bound him in the abyss, and locked and sealed upon him, that he not mislead the nations until fulfilled the, here's our word, chilia, 1,000 years, after those or these need him, loose a little time. And that's a very literal translation, but you see there that is the verse we're talking about. There's the 1,000. It's interesting to me that in, I think in our modern translations, it says up here, in the abyss, and locked him for 1,000 years and sealed him. And so that 1,000 up there is not in this manuscript. And this Sinaiticus is said to be from the 3rd, 4th century. So that's the oldest. This is the oldest copy we have of the book of Revelation, period. We have some fragments, I think, that are a little older than this, but not much. And they're completely incomplete. They only have small fragments, portions of the book. This is the first and earliest full manuscript of the whole book of Revelation. So you can see here we have the form Zilia or chilia. I keep saying it wrong, but you know what I mean. It looks like the Xilia, okay? And so it's chilia. So let's look now at Codex Vaticanus. Oh, actually, before we go there, I wanted you to see too that I also have in verses 4 through 6, the just to prove out that it uses the same word in all the cases. There's my contrast on this section, and there's the word chilia again. All right, and it's the exact same form. This next letter after the chilia is years, so I know it's not a different modified form of that word. It's not a different plural or whatever. It's the same form. It uses the same one over and over again. So at least we know there's no variation in this text. And what we're actually going to see as we go forward, none of the texts have variation between the way they use that in that passage. All right. So every time it says 1,000 in Revelation 20, it's saying it the same way. This in the Sinaiticus, we see it's chilia. So let's take a look at, and there's all the words. I did try to make sure I translated so I got the context there of this passage, but it's all the same essentially as our modern translation, just has chilia there for 1,000. So in Codex Vaticanus, and here's the page where we're going to be looking. This is part of Revelation chapter 20. And let's see here. Actually need to go back a little. Okay. Make sure I'm on the right stuff. So this is the first page of 3 that have Revelation chapter 20 on it. But here I'm bumping that contrast again on this right column where we're going to be looking. And now I'll highlight our word 1,000 and the places that it is. Let me throw the words on there that I had translated just so you can see. I did find the spot. So we're in chapter 20. Up here I translated some of verse 1. I saw an angel coming down out of heaven having the key of the abyss, and chain great was in his hand. And then verse 2, and then at the end of verse 2 you see our word here, and that is, again, it's a different form of the text. I mean, the Greek letters are written differently in this. Seems to be actually a more casual hand than the Sinaiticus was. But here in Vaticanus, you see it's chilia. Yet again, it's the Xilia. And so it's the exact same form as in Sinaiticus, which I believe these were separated by 100 years or so, if I'm not mistaken. And you can see that's consistent. It's chilia here and here. And as we go down to verse 5, it's still Xilia, chilia. No difference in the form here at all. So again, we haven't seen chilioi or chilias. That's not the form that's here. It's chilia. So now we've established that it's the same in Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. Let's look now at Codex Alexandrinus. And here's that. So I didn't have to bump the contrast here at all. It was already pretty good. So I was able to read through what I needed and find our word 1,000 right here. And here's the words I translated around it to make sure I had the right spots. But you can see here that here in Revelation 20, Codex Alexandrinus does the exact same thing, same form of the word. It is Xilia, chilia, in every case. So this word is, I've heard someone say that this word was kilion in the Greek, or kilio, O-U. I haven't seen that. And now we're in the oldest manuscripts, period. And we're not seeing that form of that word. And so that's kind of where I am with that. Let me get my notes up again so I can continue there. The last thing I looked at was I was thinking to myself at this point, well, maybe I need to check another place where I know it says the word 1,000 in one of these really, really old manuscripts and see if it does something a little different with the word than I'm seeing here. So what I thought was, I know there's that passage and everyone brings it up all the time in 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 8 about, he says, one day is with the Lord as 1,000 and 1,000 is like a day. 1,000 years is like a day or whatever. And so I went to that passage because we have even older manuscripts of that than we do of the book of Revelation. So the manuscript I'm about to show you is called the P72 manuscript. So let me bring that up. I believe this manuscript was said to have been from the 200s or so. And so let me kind of clean this up. Well, forget it. I'll just leave it the way it is. But you can see right here, this is 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 8. And you can see I translated a little of it just again to make sure I had the right place and I was looking at the right things. And this is verse 8 of chapter 3. But this be not aware to you, beloved, that one day with the Lord is as, and here's our word, 1,000 years. Now look at the form. It is still Xilia, chilia. There is no S on the end, and there is no OU on the end, and there's no ION on the end. So all those plural forms that I keep hearing people talk about when they talk about these passages and, oh, it's really a plural form. Well, it's not the plural form they keep looking for. And so I keep getting a reinforcement here that these are all consistent for one thing. And so I need to track down now if this chilia is a plural that means thousands, because this then would say the Lord is as thousands years as day one. And that's an interesting thing before we move on, because you see this is the same form as those other codices. Note how this verse is said in this manuscript, because it's a little different than in our modern English. I think either our translators added some things, or some translators somewhere along the way added some things to this verse, because it reads like this. It reads, "But this be not aware to you, beloved," this is the part, "that one day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, as day one." And so this is the way this verse is stated. It's not like our English, which says a day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as a day. That's not the way that this manuscript puts it at all. So just recognize that. I think that would be an interesting study in and of itself, but I'm not going to go there any further in this video. I just wanted you to note that as we go through here. But you can see I did translate a little bit of this I was curious about this part about the elements dissolving. We can talk about that another time too. So on this chilia now, we have seen that it's totally consistent in all these super old manuscripts. It's chilia. And there's no extra S or any other form of that word that's being used here. So then we need to talk a little bit more about Tischendorf, because he was supposedly, from what I read, he was the source of this whole debate on whether it's thousand or thousands. So let me bring up a few websites on him. Here is Tischendorf. And Tischendorf, whether you knew it or not, that Codex Vaticanus that we just looked at, he's the guy that actually discovered that thing. He was at a monastery in what is considered by some, not by myself, but some people consider the Mount Sinai in the Middle East. And there is in that location, it's the traditional Mount Sinai location of the Catholic Church. There was a monastery, and he visited this monastery, and he found there the script that is the Codex Sinaiticus. Of course, it's named Sinaiticus because of that location. They thought it was Mount Sinai. But Tischendorf is actually the guy that discovered that manuscript, which is funny considering that we just looked at that manuscript, right? And it uses this form chilia, right? But if you remember my original statement about this, the original statements I have found from people is that it used a different form of that word, not chilia. But that's not what we found in Revelation 20. And that's interesting because you can go to BibleHub.com. You can pull up Tischendorf's 8th edition, and this is it right in front of you. I can maybe zoom in a little bit and get it bigger. But you can see here now, there I've highlighted the word chilia for you, and it is the exact same form we've been looking at the whole time. So I don't understand this anomaly that we're seeing, like people are saying. Perhaps it's that I don't understand the word forms as well as I would hope that I can. But this appears to be chilia, just like we saw in the Codex. And it's not chilioi with an OI at the end. And so it again is reinforcing that same form yet again. And I read also, by the way, I found this PDF of a guy who did a study on these words, but this was confusing to me as well, because I come in here and here's the words that he says we are looking at. Chilias, which is not the form of the word that we were looking at in those old manuscripts. And he says that his comes from the Greek New Testament. I have a feeling this is from some of the Textus Receptus manuscripts, possibly, but I don't have those to look at. And from what I've read, those don't diverge from what I just looked at in these older, much older manuscripts. So it's a little confusing to me. This guy makes the argument that chilias and chilioi. And you notice here that as he's showing the transliteration, these would not be put into the Greek the same way as the word we saw in those codices. Xilia. It would be different. There's different letters that would be at the end of that word if it was to be one of these. And then he compares those to the use of the words that we translate as myriad or myriads, because those have a similar construction in the Greek. But again, these aren't the constructions of the word chilia that we saw in the Greek manuscripts that we looked at. So I'll just leave it there with Tischendorf. It was a little confusing to me as to why people are making this argument about one of his editions that had this certain form that does not seem to be in those ancient codices. And I can't even find these forms in his 8th edition, so I don't understand that. I can't explain it to you any better than what I have seen. Maybe a Greek scholar is going to be on my channel and post a comment. That'd be great. But so I started thinking, just on the basis of our modern text of Scripture, I was like, now I want to just go back to Scripture and examine, is there places in the Scripture that use the word thousands, plural? And how are those places different in the Greek from what I see as thousand, singular thousand, in Revelation 20? So let's do that study together. Let me pull back up. Here's the word. So this is the word that Strong's gives from Revelation 20. And you can see it uses a form here. It talks about this form, zilioi or chilioi, and also ends it with a possible AI or an A. So the ending with the A is what we have seen in the manuscripts only. None of these other forms. And you can see over here on the right that when it is used in the Greek, it is chilia. Chilia. This is, now notice this. This is what I came across. Chilias in Revelation chapter 11, for instance, when it says a number of thousands. It's using a different form when it's unnumbered thousands. And we're going to look closer at that in just a second. But this is one form, and here's the other, chilias, that I'm talking about. And you can see that, again, it's all very obscure and hard because Strong says this is 1,000, but then over here, when you see this word used, it's always numbered thousands, 10,000, 20,000, 5,000, 23,000, and so you can see how that works. Apparently, this form is used when it's a single thousand, and this form is always used when it's multiple thousands, always given with a number of how many thousands it is. Okay, so just recognize that that's what we're seeing in the Scriptures, that it's very consistent in the Bible. But okay, so I have pulled up now Revelation chapter 7, and you can see where it's using thousand with a number. It's always using this plural form of thousand. Okay, so whenever it says 4,000 or 12,000, it uses this form. But when it just says thousand, it uses the other form that's in Revelation 20. And so I thought this was really telling, because this helps you see that there was a lot of consistency to how these words were used. And it made me think, well, this to me says that if Revelation 20 was meant to be a number of thousands, then it would have used this form of the word. And I can't pronounce that in Greek. Let's see. Chiliois or chilioi, I don't know. Or chilios is how that's pronounced. Perhaps that's how that's pronounced. I don't know. It looks like that form has a few extra syllables there. But what I'm saying is, it seems that if that had been a true plural, that it would have used this form of the word. Do you see what I'm saying? Instead of the other form of the word, which is chilia, and seems to be singular. Whereas these are all plural form, obviously, because it's talking about multiples of that 1,000. Multiples of 1,000, 12,000, 4,000, whatever. And you'd think that in Revelation 20, that it would do this same form. And if it was thousands are ambiguous, you'd think it would have said many thousands using this form of the word. But it didn't do that. It just says 1,000. Doesn't give a number, and it doesn't use this seemingly plural form of the word. And as you can see, like I said, from our look in those manuscripts, it all seems very consistent there too. And it's always using that same singular type form of the word 1,000. Now remember that just because it's named a plural form doesn't mean it's many thousands, because the word 1,000 means more than one. So it has a plural sense that's innate to the word itself, all right? So anyway, I'm just saying that to say, just don't come down hard on it being a plural form of the word if that's true in Greek, because it means 1,000. It means many of something. But again, I just get this sense after having looked at the manuscripts and looked at how it's very consistently translated. If there's multiple thousands, it has a number of how many thousands and this plural form. And then, as in Revelation 20, it doesn't do that. It instead has simply the word chilia for 1,000 years. It doesn't give a number. It doesn't say many thousand years like the others, like that form in the other passage in Revelation 7 we just looked at. So to me, this is a very strong support that this is truly a singular 1,000 and not meant to be multiple thousands of years in any sense. Now, I did go looking, just so you know, at plural forms of Greek words on Wikipedia, and this is just, for me right now, this is a little beyond me. You can see that it goes through all the different forms of nouns, words in Greek, and gives them all to you. Now, I will say this, the only thing I noticed when I came here was that most of the plural forms I saw ended in S or IS or AS or OI or those kinds of things, but we saw a form of this word 1,000 that ended in IA. And there aren't many plural forms that even are like that that I see in Greek. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just doing my best with what I know. You can see right here is a possibility. There's the word house in the nominative vocative form plural that does have an AI at the end. I don't know that that's definitive anything. You can see here the accusative, genitive, the dative, they all have different ending forms for the plural of that word. So do you see, it just, to me, there's not many forms, plural forms that have an IA. You can see here, these plurals, that one does appear to be, or yeah, IA, that's the wrong way, that's AI. So again, you can see how this, when I came to this, I was like, I don't know, this really isn't proving the point that chilia could mean many thousands, because most of the plural forms don't end that way. They end with different letters, more letters, S's. You can see that the WV, the AS here, the IS, etc. I just couldn't find many IA plural forms. Almost no plural form ended with the A. Almost no plural form ended with the A. I don't see any here. Now there's a plural that ends with an A, but I know that this is not the form of that that word as far as the translators. That's not the form they used, so don't know that that helps the case at all. Anyway, just to show you here, I did go looking here, but this really was a little far beyond my pay grade and my level of understanding of Greek, but as I looked through plural forms, I just didn't see many that ended the way chilia does in those manuscripts we looked at. So I think that is about it. Now you've seen all the things I have seen, and you've seen how consistent this word seems to be in Revelation 20, Codex Alexandrinus, Vaticanus, Sinaiticus. It's all chilia with no additional letters that would indicate a plural. And we've seen how in the Bible it seems to be very consistently using that word chilia for thousand, singular, and a different form of the word altogether when it's many thousands. And those are usually numbered, and it's told how many thousands there are. And so we would expect in Revelation 20 to see something like many, and then the plural form of chilia that is in those other passages. We don't see that. We don't see that. It's just this word chilia, 1,000 years. To me, this made the case pretty clearly, and I felt pretty confident about this. That, number one, this combined with the fact that all the church fathers, and you can look into my eyes when I say this, all the church fathers saw it as a 1,000 year time period. They did not mistranslate this to thousands of years. And to me, before I started this study, I already knew that. And so to me, that was the nail in the coffin anyway. But I just wanted to go through this exercise to show you guys these manuscripts were as close as to what those guys read as what we will ever have. And they all point us to that it's right. It hasn't changed for centuries, and they all knew it then because they all talked about it. The 1,000-year reign. They talked about this time period of 1,000 years, and they all said it was 1,000 years. None of them said, I think it was multiple thousands of years or ambiguous thousands of years. They just didn't do it. So I hope that clears up some things for you. It did for me. I had fun again diving into these manuscripts, trying to learn as much Greek as possible. And, perhaps I'm getting better at it. I don't know. Time will tell. But thank you for joining me. Like and subscribe. Send friends my way. I think that the information, is pertinent for all of us to study this kind of thing and really understand it. I think Christianity for a long time has kind of had the blinders on to a lot of these things and just not really dug in for themselves. Each of us has that responsibility as a Christian. If we want to know more and more about God, we have the responsibility for ourselves to dig in. And I'm just trying to give you a leg up in regards to that. So thank you for joining me. God bless. Take care.